All right, man. Good morning, Rob Brown, Brendan Martin here with you. Got a lot to talk about. Brendan's got his cup of coffee, cold coffee, it looks like, with ice. It has to be cold. Double dose. All right. Hey, Rob Brown here with you. Bim Bams in Oxford. Check it out. Great place to eat. Got a lot to cover today. All right.
This is like Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway. One's iced and one's a little lukewarm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one's on ice. Yeah, one's banged up. And I'm going to tell you what, that quarterback battle, there's several of them going on in the SEC. Johnny Ballpark Franks checks in with us from Nashville in the first segment. Will Gunter, after that, over in Columbia, South Carolina. Gamecocks, man, big win on the road at Kentucky. Another key matchup for them and for LSU this weekend in Columbia.
At LSU.
Yeah, and LSU's, I mean, look, 30-21 halfway into the third quarter against Nichols at home Saturday night. Brian Kelly. Hey, Brendan, he's going to break something. He's so mad.
Yeah, well, I know the feeling sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's going to break shit.
Yeah, Yancy Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline checks in. They play Wake Forest, first test of the year, and Rodney Orr, Tiderinsider. The Tide travels to the peninsula. Talking to Brendan before the show. Great school, great campus. That is going to be a raucous, rowdy atmosphere, but I expect the Tide to win. Hey, get pen and paper handy. Smash that subscribe button. We love our subscribers. Tell your friends, your neighbors, your family. We have the best show. Yeah, executive producer Brendan Martin can overcome anything. I've never seen someone who figures out Bluetooth like that. We'll be right back. Get pen and paper handy. Lots to cover today in class, ladies and gentlemen.
Today's word of the day is Bluetooth.
Bluetooth.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
All right, we're heading up to the mid-state right now. Johnny Ballpark Franks does a great show Mondays, man, on the in Huntsville, 5 to 7 p.m. He born and raised in the Tennessee River Valley, knows his college football, loves this stuff. Johnny, here we are. It's week 3 already in college football. We've got some issues. Florida, they've got DJ Lagway coming in. Mertz is on ice right now, banged up. What's going on with the quarterback thing there? Look around. Auburn, they got one brewing. Peyton Thorne really needs to step up his game. You ain't going to win a game with a -5 turnover ratio against anybody. You might lose your own scrimmage at that one. But we're going to talk about matchups with you, and I'm going to throw them out at you. The first one I want to ask you about, first of all, Vanderbilt is 2-0, but that win over Virginia Tech, that's a positive. I love to see the doors. A lot of my family graduated from Vanderbilt. You're in Nashville. What's your thoughts on that? Can they hold the momentum? And what do you think is happening right now around the SEC? Who are the dominant teams up to this point, and who you think is not going to dominate this year based on the early numbers coming in from the precincts?
Wow, a lot to digest with what you just threw out there. So here's coffee to you. Let's start with the Vanderbilt situation. I love what Clark Lee is doing. That Virginia Tech game, remember, Virginia Tech is what everybody's drinking. Drink up.
Yes.
The Virginia Tech game, Virginia Tech was picked as a dark horse to win the ACC this year.
Yes.
That's not going to happen. I mean, I think it's the Hurricanes and everybody else there, the ACC this year. But, there's so many things about that Virginia Tech game because most people were not paying attention to Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech. I mean, in fact, it looked like a home game for Virginia Tech. But with that said, Vanderbilt jumps out to the big lead, 17-0, and then Vanderbilt did what usually Vanderbilt does. in moral victories. They lose the lead, and it's like, okay, that's where that game is going to end. And then what happens? Vanderbilt came back after losing the lead, and then they win the game in overtime.
Yeah.
And then they did what they were supposed to do last week against Alcorn State, and they rolled. I look at the bottom half of the SEC. I understand that half of the league is in the top 16 in the country. Let that sink in. In the latest AP poll, 8 of the 16 SEC teams are ranked in the top 16. 7, if you look at the top 7, 6 of the top 7 are in the SEC, are from the SEC. The other 3 big conferences, Big 12, Big 10, ACC, make up the other 8. Oh, and you notice there's no Notre Dame, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
As far as the Florida situation, can we put to rest the whole Deion Sanders is going to be the next head coach at the next opening?
Please, can we put
I've
it
been
to rest?
saying this over and over. Who is the only person I think in the country that has said that Deion Sanders cannot coach at this level?
Oh, I have been negative about him since Jump Street. I fought my dad on it. I've never bought into the whole thing.
Johnny, Brendan pointed out last year in detail about that. I mean, Johnny, you have been so dead right on that. Both of y'all have. And it's not that it's anything personal. It's just that you're being honest.
Absolutely. And, and I knew that the very first words when he came in there. Hey, if I'm Louis Vuitton, I am suing for slander right now.
Right.
So, I don't know about what.
Get your Louis.
I guess the Louis Vuitton luggage is just not made like it used to be because Deion brought it and he's not bringing it to fruition as far as W's. Did you see what their record is? I don't know about you, but coaches on hot seats, if I'm 2-8 in my last 10 games in a week conference, I might be in a situation where I'm on a hot seat. That is Deion Sanders' record in the last 10 games, 2-8. So enough with that. Billy, I said this before in the preseason that if the Gators do not win the game against the Hurricanes, remember that was a field goal game.
Yeah.
If they didn't win that game, they're not having a winning record in 2024. And a lot of it has to do with the competition, and like I said, I just threw that out there. 6 of the top 7 right now in the national rankings. The only team that's not from the SEC is Ohio State. Georgia and Texas are for real. They've done what they're supposed to. I didn't think Michigan was going to be that good. Michigan was ranked as high as they were because of what they did last year. So that was a nice win for Texas to go in and beat Michigan like that. Is it impressive, or will it be impressive maybe in another month or so? I don't think so. I don't think Michigan is that good this year. So Texas did what they had to do. They went into the big house and shut them down. Great. But that's not the big story. Let Georgia go into Texas and beat Texas, and then we'll talk. That's why I think Texas has the edge over Georgia. But I'm looking at these, who plays who, and the schedules are not fair in the SEC. I'm looking at Alabama right now, and I mentioned the other 7 teams ranked in the top 8 because Alabama's ranked 4th. Alabama has to play 5 of those 7 teams still remaining on their. So half of their schedule are teams right now ranked in the top 16. So with that said, so I don't expect to see Alabama in the SEC championship. Ole Miss is who I thought they would be. So come to Ole Miss. Missouri, don't sleep on Missouri. They're quietly going, and plus they've got a very favorable schedule as far as conference schedule. Tennessee, nobody was talking about Tennessee in the summer months. I had Tennessee going 10-2 with their only losses to Georgia and Alabama, and that's why I have Nico. Let me try it. Iamaleava.
Iamaleava.
Aliava.
Iamaleava. Iamaleava. All right, so Iamaleava. There we go. Third time's charm. That's why I have Nico being a finalist as far as the Heisman. But with that said, 10-2, it might be good enough to be that second team in the SEC championship game. The problem will be for Tennessee is I expect them to lose to Georgia. And so in a tiebreaker situation, I would have Georgia over Tennessee. But right now, I'm still sticking with my original story. I'm staying with Texas and Ole Miss in the SEC championship game.
Now, I've got Georgia and Ole Miss. Brendan, who do you have?
Georgia, Ole Miss.
Same here. Yeah, I just now look. That's how good this league is. And Johnny, we're going to bring in a couple of minutes. Will Gunter from the game 107.5 in Columbia, South Carolina, covers the Gamecocks, and I want to get some banter with y'all too, and in a minute. But before we do that, I got to ask you, what are you seeing right now, team wise? It with all the transfers coming in, it is Brian Kelly. The LSU was 30-21 midway through the third quarter at home Saturday night against Nichols, and they got the win. But you expect to take care of teams like that early. And one thing I've learned over the years, if you're struggling with teams like that, you're going to struggle against the better teams. That's a trend that absolutely works. It's like a 200-day moving average on a stock.
I will say one thing, and I credit the opportunities to hear coaches like the South Florida coach talk about the fact that going into the Bama game, you're not playing a logo, you're playing the guy in front of you. I tell you what, I was disappointed in. I was expecting more. I thought Hugh Freeze would be more of a motivator, and and I was listening to him, and boy, that motivated me enough to maybe go get a beer out of the refrigerator. That's about it. As far as going out and playing 3 hours in the sun against Cal, not so much. I think he needs to up his game. Bobby Bowden, my late friend, and I love him to death and miss him so much still. We talked about this before where he kept he kept all of his speeches and things that he wrote out and things he talked about. But yeah, there were some that he said he would go throw them straight to the garbage can, that they just didn't work. I was expecting more out of Hugh Freeze in pregame. If you're not going to fire up a team, get a player, get a leader in there being that guy, because Hugh Freeze didn't seem to be that guy to me. Maybe somebody needed to pep him up. That was an embarrassment. I have to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I thought last year the loss to Mexico State, that's one thing. As far as that's a new level of embarrassment, just like Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. But losing to Cal, Auburn at this point under Hugh Freeze has no business losing to Cal, just like they had no business being unprepared last year in the Music City Bowl. And I throw in the same lines is Coach Stoops with Kentucky. What happened on Saturday against South Carolina? Great. Not to take anything away from South Carolina. More athletic. They wanted the game. They were more physical, especially on defense. But that's an embarrassment for Kentucky to look like that. And oh, by the way, after you announce the score, coming up on Saturday night, the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs coming to town to take on Kentucky. Yeah, hold me back for the excitement on that one.
Yeah, let me say this. I love the text I just got. Ray Mooring and his wife Beth out at Glacier National Park. Beautiful background, watching sidelines on the mountain. Thank you, Ray Mooring, proud native son of, guess where, Johnny? The smartest city in Alabama, and that is
Huntsville, Alabama.
You damn right. I love it. Look, let's bring in Will Gunter from over in Columbia right now. And you're right. Notre Dame has lost under Marcus Freeman 3 home games as double-digit favorites. A 22-point favorite against Marshall in his first year, a 16-point home favorite against Stanford, and 28.5 against Northern Illinois. Will Gunter beaming with excitement, Gamecock pride, going on the road. I think were the assault charges dropped against South Carolina for what they did to Kentucky, 31-6. You coming home this weekend. There'll be a little excitement there at Williams-Brice Stadium Saturday. LSU coming in. You're on with Johnny Ballpark Franks, and let's talk some Gamecock football and SEC and what you think's happening.
Yeah, they dropped the assault charges, and then now they've accused us of theft, of stealing, which I actually do think happened. It sounds like game day was going to Kentucky for Kentucky and Georgia this past weekend, and with South Carolina winning, college game day is now coming to Columbia. So not just beating them up,
wow.
But took game day from them. So it'll be the first time it's the first time in 10 years college game day has been in Columbia, and for a noon game, and they've got Fowler and Herb Street on the call. So you're right. There's a lot of people. It's a drastic change. I don't think I was on with you last week. It's a drastic change from last week.
Old Dominion.
It was, our tech line has done a complete 180. But it obviously was a good performance. It was one our particular show in the mornings listed as maybe the biggest game for Shane Beamer's coaching career. You go up to a place where it's talent, it's equal talent. This thing's really turned into a rivalry between South Carolina and Kentucky. I was given the numbers last week. 16 of the last 24 games going into last week, the last 24 games, 16 had been decided by 10 points or less. 14 of those games had been decided by 7 points or less. It's actually nobody likes to admit it. Nobody wants to say Kentucky is your rival, but Georgia doesn't look at South Carolina as a rival. Tennessee does not look at South Carolina as a rival. We tried to manufacture something with Steve Spurrier in Florida with a rivalry there when we got Spurrier. Honestly, Kentucky and both teams are fighting, especially when you had divisions. You were fighting to get into that upper group along with Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee for the better part of the last 33 years. That's another crazy stat. South Carolina and Kentucky in South Carolina's history have played the second most consecutive times, 33 straight years, only behind or tied with, they've played the most consecutive times of anybody playing South Carolina, 33 straight years. That'll be tied with Vanderbilt when South Carolina plays Vanderbilt, I assume, in November, providing nothing catastrophic happens. Because the Clemson game got canceled in 2020. So it's crazy. It's a fun rivalry. It's a legitimately two fan bases that don't like each other. And I'm pretty sure, even though they won't say it publicly now, two coaches that do not like each other.
Yeah. Johnny,
I was just, along those same lines, we're talking about games that should have been a close game as you were throwing out those stats, and it wasn't. Wow. And credit South Carolina about that. I was, breaking that up on my show yesterday. And this isn't just name, image, and likeness or transfer portal. This has been really going on. I can even go back to when Jim Harbaugh was head coach at Stanford, a major underdog and taking care of business against Pete Carroll and USC. We look at some of these games, especially over the last 7 or 8 years, Urban Meyer at Ohio State, Ryan Day at Ohio State, heavy favorites against teams inside the Big Ten and losing those games. It's happening more and more. To me, last year with Auburn and New Mexico State, Auburn was a 3+ touchdown favorite, and it looked like the wrong team was favored. It's just football these days, and it really has nothing to do with name, image, and likeness. It has everything to do with more parity, players having a chance to go. One team can't get all the players like they could back in the 70s. And so with that said, give me a veteran team like Northern Illinois, a team that had a lot of people back, a lot of playing experience, and then you match that up against a team that, bringing guys in or whatever the case may be with the transfer portal, not really knowing each other. The chemistry is a key. And so, we look at Florida State, and I don't think we will be watching them much now after what has happened, like their defensive front. Their defensive front is individuals. You will be seeing these guys making a lot of money in the NFL. As individuals, great. Playing as a unit and a cohesive unit, they didn't look good against either Georgia Tech or Boston College. And that's what we're seeing. These 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, if one person's not doing their job, you're going to have problems. And so that's something to keep on watching as we play out this season.
Yeah, Will, along that line, this matchup with LSU coming in, how are you going to attack them? What are the 3 things you think South Carolina must do to get the win? Because somebody every year that doesn't expect it, walk into their car, la-di-da, gets whacked in Columbia.
Yeah, I want to go back real quick, and it'll kind of lead me into where I'm going with this week's game to what Johnny was saying. We make fun of we made fun of him a little bit, but what Shane Beamer said after the game is actually true, and I think it's true a lot amongst a lot of media. We have a bunch of, as Shane said, lazy narratives in college football today. Now, some of that is because we assume things with the transfer portal that are not true. Just think about what you just said with Florida State and DJU. Well, he's coming back to Florida State. He's got to be better, right? Can't be as bad as he was at Clemson. No, he's not. He's not better. They're going to probably, I guess, bench him for Brock Glenn there at some point. There was a narrative after the Old Dominion game that, South Carolina is really bad. Like, they might only win 3 games. This wasn't a bad football team. They're starting a redshirt freshman quarterback. The offensive line had some issues. But if you really paid attention to that Old Dominion game, it very well could have been 38 to 6. There were 2 touchdowns scored in that game that were busted plays by the Gamecocks. I think as media and Vegas is having – look, I love Vegas. I love big Vegas fan. Didn't do well this weekend. I hate Iowa right now. I am not a fan of anything related to Iowa and probably hate Iowa State a little more. Thank you, Tennessee, for covering well to bring me back close to even on Saturday night. But the bottom line is, Vegas can't get it right. Why did we assume that Notre Dame was going to be a 4-touchdown favorite over Northern Illinois? It's not like they went in and crushed Texas A&M. If anybody watched it was ugly. Riley Leonard wasn't particularly great against A&M, and I don't know how good A&M is. So to circle back to the question you asked about LSU, I don't know how good this LSU team is. What do we really know about Southern Cal? There seems to be, now I don't know if this is going to be true or not. I may very well be wrong on Sunday morning, but LSU doesn't seem to play with the same scary physical nature that I am used to seeing them play. Their offense and defensive line, something's off there. They don't. My co-host played football at South Carolina, and we talked about LSU. And the one thing you knew LSU was talented. There's 5 stars, 4 stars on all the field, but they physically beat you up. They under Les Miles. And even Ed Orgeron, they physically just took you apart and scared you almost as much for your next game because of how bruised and battered you were going to be. Look at what they did. They gave up 145 yards rushing to
Nichols.
I forget to one running back.
The quarterback.
Guggenheim or whatever. But, and they struggled running the ball. I think they only had 68 yards now without John Emery. So to answer your question, I think part of it is the South Carolina defensive line controlling that game, forcing Garrett Nussmeier to throw to a really, really talented wide receiving group. And then South Carolina trying to pressure Garrett Nussmeier. I think that's goal number 1. That's where South Carolina's been good the first 2 weeks. Number 2 is South Carolina's offense has to continue to develop. You've got Lenore Sellers, who made strides last week. That LSU defensive line is not as, for whatever reason, is not as deep and not as scary as they have been. Can he make some plays with his legs? And is this the week you see Rocket Sanders really break out and be Rocket Sanders that we got to know at Arkansas in 2022? I think those are the 2 big things, because Sellers isn't going to beat you right now with his arm. But if you can if they can run the ball effectively, South Carolina only had 252 yards of total offense against Kentucky, but it was timely plays and it was hitting some passes that then opened up the run game late in the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Johnny, what he just said is spot on. And consider Bo Davis, great defensive line coach from Texas, who's been at Alabama too, is back at LSU, along with Missouri's defensive coordinator. They spent $16.5 million on bringing in that defensive staff and all. Johnny Ballpark Franks, where's the ROI to this point at LSU?
I have a little bit of a theory here, and I think it has a little bit to do with Nick Saban. You talk about that intensity and everything, like with Les Miles, even Ed Orgeron was still measured against, what Nick Saban has done. And what I think now that, you get further removed from the Nick Saban cloud that's in Baton Rouge, because it was there for years. You talk to anybody in Baton Rouge, everybody was always being compared to Nick Saban. Well, look what Nick Saban is doing. And I think with Brian Kelly, he's just not that coach. And I think that you lose a little bit. It's like if you're at Auburn, you're always comparing yourself with what we're doing compared to what's happening in Tuscaloosa. I think that it helps when you've got another program pushing you to be that.
I've always said that. Yeah.
I mean, I think it really, now it's going to be really strange now that we no longer have divisions. But when we talk about what is Hugh Freeze doing in his second year? Well, this other coach won a national title. You're always in the SEC being compared to another program. If you're a fan base, if you're a have-not, you're looking to see, well, why are they being so successful so early? We're not. If you're Oklahoma and you see Texas coming, look, this is not like a big announcement that just happened a month ago. back in 2021, Texas and Oklahoma knew they were coming into the SEC. So you had 3 years to prepare to be in this situation. Texas is prepared. Oklahoma is not. And if you're a fan of Oklahoma, you're going to be saying, hey, how come we're not doing what Texas is doing? In the SEC, it's all about what that team and that program you're comparing yourself to, what they're doing. If they're successful and you're not, you're going to be constantly asking why.
Well, this is something I know we've got about 5 minutes with this segment before we have to switch over. We're going to have Yancy and Rodney on in a minute. But while I've got y'all two together, you just nailed it about I tell people this, there's no rivalry if your rival is 2-8 and not good. We've always had a coach that's the standard. Hugh Freeze, every coach since Pat Dye took over at Auburn after Doug Barfield was fired in their second year at Auburn has won 8 games or more. That's the standard. Brian Harsin, so bad, he didn't even make it through his second year. They mercifully pulled the plug on him and sent him back to in orbit. He's out there somewhere. I hope he never lands. But look, Will, Shane Beamer, this guy's, he you talk about positive. You get some momentum going with South Carolina and Clemson, deciding what they're going to do with the portal and all. Here's an opportunity for South Carolina. You get a win Saturday night against LSU. What's the ceiling?
Yeah, we talked a lot. We transitioned over to the LSU game this morning, and I really truly do think it is the biggest game of Shane Beamer's tenure, because if you win this, you've won whichever one. I think Brad Crawford with 24/7 Sports, he picked South Carolina to lose to Kentucky but beat LSU because it's at home, which you mentioned about coming to Williams-Brice. But if you win this game, you're really staring down the barrel of being 4-0 through September. You get Akron, and then you get a bye week, and then you get Lane Kiffin and Mississippi coming in, and the excitement that brings. So there's a lot of positives, there. The other part is you get game day here in Columbia. This is a great recruiting tool for Shane Beamer. The fact that it's a noon game and that these recruits are going to be in around 9 a.m. and they're going to see the excitement. Preston Thorne, again, my co-host, he mentioned something I never thought of. It's a great point. You might not have other recruits watching game day. Maybe it doesn't resonate with them. What you do have other recruits doing is looking at other recruits' social media. So if you've got a top recruit, they're walking around and he's Instagramming himself and taking pictures and showing videos and showing the atmosphere. Other recruits see that. It's like, wow, look at that environment. I want to go see what that's like. I want to go see that in person. And then all of a sudden you get them on campus.
That's right.
And it was a great point about the use of social media amongst big recruits these days who are paying attention. And then finally, the third part of this is you're right. Shane Beamer, when he's winning here, is loved. We love his energy. We love his enthusiasm. I don't know if people in Tennessee or Kentucky or Clemson or Georgia love seeing him do some of the stuff he does. And if he wins on Saturday and you give him a microphone at the end of the game, there can be a Dabo Swinney-esque bring your guts or, something that we love, something that drives other people crazy and can incite a little bit more. And again, if they can win that game, 7-point underdog right now. Look, I'm not sold on Texas A&M, who will be a home game for South Carolina. Oklahoma is going to be coming off of the Red River rivalry, and that game is scheduled to be played early. So the 12-2 window there. I'm not sold on Oklahoma, especially with South Carolina's defensive line, with what they look like versus that offensive line.
Yeah.
South Carolina has and Clemson, I'm not sold on right now as well. You open the door to maybe an 8-win season with an upset somewhere that could be 9 wins and throw this program into another trajectory, which we thought was lost when you missed a bowl last year.
Yeah.
Wait,
I think Will is underselling this. If you beat LSU Saturday, you're staring at the 9-3 or 10-2 season. That's where I think all of a sudden South Carolina puts itself in, because I see that SEC schedule, and the possibility there for me is being able to survive it with only 2 losses. Even that's how big this game against LSU is.
That would be crazy. I guess I still look at it. I really like what Ole Miss has done so far, but I don't know how, again, who have you, this goes back to what I said about Vegas. What do we know? What do we know about some of these teams right now? What do we really know about Missouri, who hadn't given up a touchdown this year, but has beaten Murray State and Buffalo? Are we buying that Missouri is legit top
You know
10?
what we do know? We do know this about all those programs you're mentioning, that they have solid quarterbacks. They have solid leaders in that locker room with that quarterback. And this is something it comes in cycles. The SEC has those leaders this year at that position.
Yeah, let's bring in Yancy Porter real quick before we let y'all get going on your day. Yancy Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline. Catch it Monday night, Sports 56, WHBQ in Memphis, 6 p.m. and all over on Super Talk, Mississippi. Mississippi. It's 2 syllables, guys. You all know that.
That's right.
Yancy, how are you, man?
It sometimes can be 1 syllable, just Mississippi.
Yeah, you damn right.
Kind of one solid one.
Look, you're on with Johnny Ballpark Franks up in Nashville and Will Gunter, 107.5, The Game in Columbia, South Carolina. And he was just talking about
the Doors are the talk of the league right now. He's got to be happy.
That's right. Hey,
I'm
here we
happy
go.
for him.
Yeah. Hey, Austin City Limits got nothing on us. This is Sideline City Limits. You bring in Johnny. You bring in Will. You bring in Yancy. Real quick, Yancy, I want to hear your thoughts about that matchup. Not that you're ignoring Wake Forest, because you got to go to Winston-Salem this weekend, but you do have a matchup Will just mentioned coming up with South Carolina. I mean, look, in the SEC, there's nowhere to hide. 6 of the top 7, as Johnny alluded to earlier in the show, ranked right now. Now, we'll play each other and we'll start knocking each other out. But let's talk about the Rebels matchup coming up as you look at South Carolina at this point.
Well, I mean, who knows about South Carolina, right? I mean, they're the biggest unknown variable in the SEC right now after 2 weeks, because they played just one extreme to the other extreme. So I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest news story with Ole Miss right now is the only thing that people are talking about on the message boards, because the administration set up 2 games against inferior opponents, is why are the fans not staying in the second half against Slippery Rock Tech when they're up 63-0. So
Yeah,
it's been a yawner to be honest.
Yeah, it got to be tough.
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, I think South Carolina, they've got, obviously they can play at one end as they did in the opening game of the season, and then they can play to the other end as they played last week against Kentucky. And they're going to always play with energy. I just don't know. I mean, they're the only team in the SEC I truly don't have a pulse on right now.
Yeah, and it will. I mean, you hear that, and you get the win against LSU. It's so early, and with the transfer portal, if you can build a culture, microwave speed versus slow, indirect heat, you can get momentum, and it's like a fire that just gets out of control, and you're not watching.
Yeah, I think for South Carolina, the offensive line is still a work in progress. It took a step forward this week against what is a pretty good defensive line against Kentucky. Deion Walker is gonna make some serious money in the NFL here, probably in the next year. But with that being said, Lenora Sellers, if that game against Mississippi was in November, I might like South Carolina's chances better. We gave a stat last week. After the Old Dominion game, try to follow me on this. In the first 4 games for Shane Beamer of each year, now it's 14 games total, right? The first 4 games. Well, last week after the Old Dominion game, they were 7-6. I don't know why they don't start good. I have theories. Not enough time to go into them. They were 7-6 in those first 4 games. They only had 1 Power 5 victory, and that was over Mississippi State, and they had been demolished by Georgia twice, beaten by North Carolina, hammered by Arkansas. They didn't open the season well. That's kind of what made last week a little bit of a shock because of how poorly they played. But late in the season, the final 4 games of the season, Shane Beamer is 8-4 in the last 3 years, and that includes wins over Clemson, Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky, Vanderbilt's in there as well, Florida, and then actually 7 SEC wins and Jacksonville State. This team's still developing, and Yancy, to your point, I don't think anybody's going to know what South Carolina is until about mid-November. They're going to have that stretch of games in October where it's Alabama, Oklahoma, and Mississippi on the 5th. It's an interesting team. I go back. There's so many teams in this league I don't know anything about right now. I don't know if Kentucky's really that bad. I don't know if Missouri and Mississippi are really that good. what is Florida now with DJ Lagway? Is Connor Weigman the guy at Texas A&M, or was that just playing McNeese? There's this league really outside of Georgia and Texas, and you can say the same thing about Alabama, who was up a point, 14-13 going into the fourth quarter. What is this league right now? Are they 6 of the top 7 teams in the country, or is it a middling league with a bunch of average teams that's still trying to figure things out? It's an interesting league right now.
Hey, Will, I mean, those are great points. And hey, listen, 107.5 the game. You're all over the great Palmetto State, South Carolina. Let's do this again next Tuesday. Johnny, we'll bring you back on again next Tuesday with Will. I like the two of y'all together because y'all are two smart guys making people think, and I appreciate that. And follow you, Johnny, the UMP, Mondays, 5 to 7 p.m. in Huntsville. Give us a Twitter handle, Johnny and Will, and I'll let you go.
Yes, you can keep up with me on Twitter at BP Franks Show. You can also follow me on Facebook at Johnny Ballpark Franks.
Hey, man, this is great stuff.
And at Will, Will Gunter, Gunter, man. Look forward to it next Tuesday.
Hey, y'all made me think. My head is spinning right now. All right, have a great day, guys. Yancy, going to have Rodney come on here in just a second from Tiderinsider. Man, I tell you what, that was, you think about this league right now, this game against Wake Forest that y'all have Saturday. I think Wake Forest, I think Dave Clawson, as Chuck Oliver says, he gets 50 pounds out of a 10-pound sack like very few coaches do. Let's talk about the 2 or 3 things Ole Miss must do to get the win other than dominate from the get-go.
Well, the odds
as they say in the country.
Yeah, the odds makers has definitely put it in that category. I don't know what I think about a 24-point spread, but on the road. But look, Wake Forest has a good offensive line, a good quarterback, and as we'll talk to your next guest, that is very key, right? So they've got a great head coach. Usually, when you got a really good head coach, a really good quarterback, and a good offensive line, you got a pretty good ball team. They dominated Virginia until midway through that fourth quarter. They were up big, gave up the lead. That's what you see from teams that are trying to still learn how to win. We know that they struggled last season. We know that they had a good run before last season. I really don't know as far as a key factor too. As long as Dart just keeps playing like he is, he's 47 for 54 for close to 1,000 yards. 6-7 touchdowns, no interceptions. If he plays the way that he's playing right now, the Ole Miss is going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, Rodney Orr, Tiderinsider, WVUA TV 23 tonight, Tuesday nights at 6:30. He does a great show with Gary Harris covering Alabama college football. It is great stuff. Only $48 a year since 1996. Rodney doesn't know what the word inflation means. Rodney just delivers great content. A proud native son of Mobile, brief resident of Corpus Christi, Texas. Rodney, real quick, I talked to a guy that watches this show a lot. Love him. Dr. David Arnoff down in the Panhandle, Panama City, Fort Walton, a great doctor down there. And he said, what would be cool is when you have your guests on, because we have a huge audience of Florida people and Auburn and SEC all over, kind of open up with a couple of things about Alabama maybe that everybody needs to know, some facts, some history or something real quick, and then your thoughts about the game this past Saturday. But welcome aboard.
Well, first of all, thank you. And you're asking for me to provide history in 30 seconds on Alabama?
No, just a couple of things, maybe a couple of things people don't know. Like, hey, I'll tell you, here's one, Rodney, and Bryant Denny Stadium. How important from 1912 to 1935 was Dr. Denny to Alabama? Don't take his name off the stadium's all I'm saying.
No. Yeah, they couldn't do that.
Okay.
Look, here's what I like. Is, they named the field after Saban. It's about Nick Saban. It's kind of personal for him, right? I mean, you got the stadium, now you got the field. It's going to be real interesting to see how people continue as time goes on to refer to it. Like Soldier Field.
Yeah.
Will it start becoming Saban Field? Just kind of the, general, reference to it. But anyway, with all that said, it was a great night. Here's the crazy thing, guys. I'm sitting there and I'm in the press box and I'm watching this moment with Nick Saban. The field's being dedicated to him, and I'm thinking, man, I remember like yesterday sitting in that introductory press conference on January the 4th, 2007. Where did the 17 years go? I mean, I know to other schools, other programs in the SEC, it might have seemed like an eternity.
Yeah.
But the Alabama people, I mean, it just seems like this 17 years went by in a blur. I
It
mean,
did.
it just really does, you know.
Yeah.
But
That's just called
anyway,
age.
it was a great moment. It was a great moment. You know, the celebration, obviously, of a lot of great moments. But yeah, so there's your history piece. How about that?
Yeah, and you know what, guys? That is like my son said. College football season starts, and it's just like pow. You know, you're like, where'd it go? And then we're excited about the next one. You know, Rodney, what was your takeaway before we bounce back to Yancy on the game Saturday? It's 14-13 in the fourth quarter. I thought Alabama would struggle a little bit with this team, but I did think they would cover, and they almost pulled me out. What a miraculous last 6 minutes. That was
Well,
amazing.
yeah, you know, here's the thing, too. I'll say this. It's kind of like last week after they demolished, you know, Western
Western
Kentucky
Kentucky, yeah.
63 to nothing. I said, look, you can't really take anything from that. Who knows? I mean, they beat Middle Tennessee State last year. Was it 56-7 in the opener?
Yeah.
And then the next week they got exposed against Texas. You know, it's kind of the same thing here. I'm not saying that USF necessarily exposed them, although they did in some ways. I mean, it's just you know, you got a new coaching staff, you've got some new players in positions, you've got an offensive line that was in shuffles, you know, being shuffled. So I mean, there was a lot of things there that really kind of led to this performance that I think for the most part was not very awe inspiring. But I mean, it just happens, you know. And again, I think people. Here's the problem, man. Right now, everybody has these expectations that it's the same as it's been the last 17 years or
Yeah.
whatever. And this has nothing really to do with Kalen DeBoer. He's taking over a program with different players in different spots. They've got injuries, just different things that have happened on the offensive line. So they've got a lot of issues to manage. And plus, I think that the schedule they have is one of the more difficult schedules that they've had in a while because a
Yeah.
lot of these teams have improved. So I say all that to say, yeah, I'm kind of tempering expectations a little bit because, you know, you just got to take them one at a time and you have to be, you know, you have to be a little bit patient. But that really isn't a message that reaches most people.
Let me say something real quick about one of our sponsors, the Vitamin Shop, Oxford in Olive Branch, Mississippi. They've got all kinds of products that you can buy. They have a staff of people that are trained that actually know what they're talking about. Check out the QR code. You can order products. I like the goo, the shot blocks, and the prebiotics. Proud to have them as a sponsor, as we are with Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. And it's harvest time, folks. My goodness, you wouldn't believe how much farmland there is here in the Mid-South. Rice, beans, corn, milo, absolutely. The cotton will be harvested, you know, in late October, November. HouseIndustriesInc.com. Proud to have them as a sponsor. A little bit of trivia, Gary and Rodney. I mean, and Yancy. I was talking to my friend Ed Hall. Used to be a writer for the Columbus Ledger Inquirer. He listens every day and watches the show down in Lynette, Alabama. He's an Alabama grad, great person. And we were talking about Caleb Downs, you know, who transferred from Alabama to Ohio State. And he said, you remember his dad? And I said, Gary Downs. He used to come in the newsroom at Channel 3 in Columbus a lot because he played at Baker High School in Columbus, Georgia. I think he was a running back at NC State. And that's his son, Caleb Downs, Rodney. That's what a small world we live in. Kind of cool watching that. Yancy, yeah, we know Sam Hartman left and went to Notre Dame. What do you know about Wake Forest that this audience here and the rest of the free world better know come Saturday?
Well, again, I mean, when you have a really, really solid quarterback and a solid offensive line and a solid head coach, anything can happen, right? I think defensively they've got some issues that Ole Miss can certainly expose. Offensively, you know, but You can ask Rodney over there. I've been having a really good offensive line and quarterback can mask a lot of deficiencies, as we saw with Alabama. When you have offensive line issues, when you have depth issues, and you got a quarterback that's inconsistent in the passing game, and that gets exposed when the offensive line struggles, a lot of things can happen. So they've got some issues. It's more on the defensive side than the offensive side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brendan, if you can jump in real quick. I want to get your thoughts. I mean, you're looking at it, you know football, you know plays, you understand all the minutia going on. And you look at quarterback play and you look at Florida with Mertz being hurt. This is an opportunity. Do you want DJ Lagway to have
Yes.
everything put on him now? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yes.
Because it's so big. Yeah, I'm curious. Because it's going to be tough.
I don't know. Like we talked about this before. This is not a knock against the person of Billy Napier, all these kind of things. I just don't think he's the guy. I've been vocal about that since the get go. As far as the scheming and the offensive line, not getting an offensive coordinator. This feels like, I guess I hold my breath because it feels a little bit of what happened to AR when he came in, right? Similar kind of quarterback, triple threat kind of a thing. I just don't know if Billy's scheme as offensive coordinator is really, sort of up to par with, what kind of athletes on the field. I've said that before. I'm nervous, even watching Lagway play, a couple times, they called his number to keep right, keep left. I understand that's part of the offense. You got to do those things, but he's super young and he's going to be amazingly awesome, right? Sorry for my grammar, but he's going to be special and he already is. I just would love to develop him a little bit. And I'm trying to look up if Mertz is out this week. I don't think he is. So I think he's back this week. So,
okay.
So he will not start. And I think Billy, he said in his press conference yesterday, there will be a package for Lagway every single week. So, I think we're seeing what we were going to see, but like I said, a couple of weeks ago, we're seeing DJ Lagway a lot earlier than a lot of people did or thought we were going to see him. So
good observation.
Rob, let me answer that question for you there. Yes, Florida needs to get the ball to Lagway and never look back. I don't care how developed he is. They're dead with the other quarterback.
But
I told you in the off season that I had no idea why Hugh Freeze did not go get him a big time transfer quarterback.
Yeah, you're right.
I have no idea how Florida is going to continue playing what they're playing when you've got this guy sitting in the wings that excites the fan base, excites the SEC. I mean, I love watching him play. I don't even cover Florida. He will bring energy to that huddle. He will totally change that offense. Lagway, the only time he doesn't need to be in the game is if he's hurt.
I think DJ Lagway is the next great player in the SEC who will put the fear of God into opponents. Rodney, tell us some things we don't know that we need to know about Wisconsin going up on the peninsula. I mean, that's going to be at Camp Randall Stadium. It's not the bounce house like UCF has, but they will play jump or something like that in the third or fourth quarter. A lot of Alabama fans going to make that trek up there. They would travel to, Jupiter to see Alabama play, even if it was on TV. But let's get your take on this matchup Saturday in Madison.
Well, I just wonder, Wisconsin hasn't been very impressive in their first two games, obviously. But you almost wonder how much time they've kind of devoted to Alabama.
Yeah.
I'll be really surprised if Wisconsin doesn't play well, because Luke Fickell is, to me, a really good coach. He's a fantastic coach. He's a guy that, potentially is going to end up with even a more prominent job, I think, eventually, just watching him through his career and things he did at Cincinnati. So I think defensively for Wisconsin, it's going to be really interesting. Look, let's be honest. They're outmatched athletically. We know that. But, that's not always the way the game goes. And it's going to be interesting to see how they defend Milroe. I mean, do they come after him, which I expect them to do?
Yeah.
Because I think Michigan really kind of exposed that when you come after him and try to force him to make quick decisions with the ball. I mean, there's usually let's just be honest. And I mean, I think, Yancy Porter pointed this out. He mentioned this. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. The inconsistencies with Jalen Milroe have continued thus far. And I understand it's a new offense. There's a lot of new things happening right now. He's an incredible athlete. He can make some really big time throws at times. I mean, you see him and you go, wow, okay, that's a great play. He stood in there. He stepped up. He delivered the ball on time. But then the next 3 or 4, you're like, okay, they're not so well done. So I think it's just the consistency with him, and it's going to be interesting to see because I think Fickle's going to come after him. Let's see how that plays out, in this game. But it's an 11 a.m. game, which think about this though. Which to me, going on the road that far away, playing that early in the morning, unfamiliar territory. None of these guys have ever played there before. Now, it's kind of a different deal. It's a different feel, and especially early in the morning. Now, the good thing is Alabama practices every morning, right?
Yeah.
So 11 a.m. is about the time they're wrapping up practices. So that shouldn't be really tough for them in terms of just the time frame. But I do think, it's going to be interesting just to see this first road trip for Kalen DeBoer, his staff, this team under DeBoer. It's going to be interesting to see how they respond.
Yeah, I mean, I like your take on Luke Fickell. I think he is a great coach. I mean, I'm not a great yet, but he's going to be.
He's potentially a really, really good coach.
Yeah, and I watched, by the way, Jim Tressel. People have their opinions on him, but all he did was win. He wore the sweater vest, but he wore it well, and he didn't pick his nose when he wore it on the sidelines, like some people at the bounce house, I might add. But Gus, stop doing that. All right, Yancy, you heard what he said. Again, you're going in there to Wake Forest. Ole Miss, we talked about it yesterday. The University of Saban at Athens, in Oxford, and Austin. All 3 of those teams right now in the top 7 in the country. And Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, you and Rodney and Brendan, a couple of years ago, before when they thought Luke Altmaier was going to be the quarterback, I'll give credit to Yancy. You said he's more of the gunslinger that Lane Kiffin is looking for. Dart just keeps getting better. Is he 20 years old yet? And he's a special talent too.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows the system of third year in a system, right, of being the guy and in Lane's offense. And so he's special. I mean, honestly, he is. And what's really helping him is what is the issue there at Alabama, what Rodney had been talking about with the offensive line issues and some depth concerns. And then we saw what happened. They get some injuries. They're reshuffling around. Kind of reminded me a lot of what happened Ole Miss last year against Georgia. Guys aren't playing in their position. Now a quarterback that really needs time to see the field doesn't have that time. Then he starts second guessing himself, and it kind of snowballs, right? And so what Dart has had, the Ole Miss went out and signed 4 of the top 6 transfers to the offensive line in the country. They got depth. They got 3 of their starters last year that are out, that are in injuries. They're not out for the season. One broke his hand. Other 2 have a groin injury. The other one has a hamstring injury, but they're able to replace those guys because of what they signed in the offseason there in the transfer portal, and they're not missing a beat. Actually, they're playing even at a higher level than they did last year. So the offensive line is playing at an extreme high level. That's giving Dart plenty of time to survey the field. Like I said, I mean, he's 47 for 54, throwing 88% clip, close to 900 yards, 6 touchdowns, and no interceptions. But you give someone like Milroe, if he's got Ole Miss's offensive line, maybe he doesn't put up those kind of numbers, but it makes him more comfortable. And where Milroe struggles is where he gets happy feet, where he doesn't trust the offensive line, and for good reasons sometimes, right? So the offensive line is so critical for any team.
Yeah, Rodney, I want to ask you about Alabama's offensive line. Jaden Roberts, He's a big boy, about 6'4", 340. And then you look at Wilkin Formby over there. Is he nailed down that right tackle spot at this point at 6'8", 325 pounds out of Northridge High School in Tuscaloosa, teammate of John May?
Well, here's the thing. I think when you look at the offensive line with Caden Proctor, hasn't taken a snap yet, right? He hadn't taken a snap this year. So what you haven't had your five best, if you want to look at it that way, guys on the field at the same time. So your best, part of your best offensive lineman, certainly Tyler Booker at left guard. He had to move out to left tackle. You had to bring in a transfer, Gino Vandermark, to plug in at left guard this game. All right, so there's a lot of shuffling going on. There's a lot of uncertainty in that. They played pretty well at times, together. Once Gino kind of got his feet settled in. But, obviously Wilkin had some holding calls against him. Some of them maybe, ticky-tack or whatever. But here's the thing. Offensive line is a really developmental position. You can think you're ready, and then all of a sudden, you realize this is a different level. Wilkin, came out, he was really raw, in high school. I think that he came out as he's a really talented kid. He's got great size. He's got a lot of potential, but sometimes it takes a little time and experience to kind of really settle in. And I think he kind of learned a little bit, on Saturday night, what it is when you're going up against guys that are really athletic and fast. I mean, you got to constantly move your feet, and you've got to, certainly have that range at that tackle spot to get to those guys. But you know what? You're right. Yancey's right. And, the offensive line right now is still a work in progress, obviously. And you got to get your best five on the field as quickly as possible.
All right. With that being said, Caden Proctor, will he play Saturday against Wisconsin? Or
that's a good that's a good question. I really don't know. I would probably, if you asked me today, I would say, if they could hold him, they probably would, just to, give him a little more time. But I thought they were going to hold Pritchett last week, and then they put him in at the end of the game, the last 6 or 8 minutes of the game. They felt like they had to do it, I guess. And so they went with that. And so, we'll see with Proctor, but they've got to get whoever they feel are the best five. They've got to get them on the field because, they haven't had a snap together yet.
Yeah. All right. Hey, another bit of trivia about Ole Miss, and Dr. Arnoff's right to say, mention things because a lot of people don't know about every SEC team. They know their school. Ole Miss, 3 national championships, 6 SEC titles. And in the last 3 years, 21 and 23, they won 10 and 21, 11 and 23, which is the most wins in the regular season in Ole Miss history. So there's a lot of momentum there. Rodney, I like that talk about the offensive line and Jalen Milroe having to adjust to Kalen DeBoer and the way he does it. And you've got some really good quarterbacks that are there, like Ty Simpson out of Martin, Tennessee. Yancey, God forbid, Jackson Dart goes down. Quarterback room at Ole Miss has got some talent. Who's behind him? And who's getting some reps?
Austin Simmons is taking over the number 2 slot.
What happened to Walker Howard?
He's just getting beaten out right now, honestly. Simmons is just playing better. I mean, this is a guy that skipped 2 grades. The infamous, Ole Miss signed him. He was committed to Florida, and then he commits to Ole Miss after taking a trip, snuck in over a weekend, and then skips his senior year. So he's still supposed to be a senior this year in high school.
What is he, 14?
He just turned 18, though. He just turned 18.
Okay.
He's a freshman. He's a redshirt freshman, and he's just turned 18. So Lane likes those young quarterbacks in age. I don't know. That's kind of a trend I'm seeing there. But I think,
it is. It's a trend, Yancey. You're right.
It is a trend.
Youth is a trend with Lane. You're right.
Yeah, he likes the young guys. Maybe he can mold them easier that way when they're so young. I don't know. Simmons is the guy right now. He's taking all the snaps behind Dart, and look, he's got the best arm talent on the team, and that includes Dart in that picture. But that arm talent is only about 30% of being a quarterback, right? So he's been inconsistent. he's kind of looked a lot like Milroe at times. He makes a throw where it makes your mouth drop, and then he'll make another decision sometimes where you're like, "What in the world were you looking at?" So, there's some inconsistencies, and let's from Ole Miss's sake, you just hope that they're not put in that position.
Well, look, we talk about this kid skipping his junior and senior year. I must ask this question to this panel here because y'all all can answer it. Jethro Bodine was in the 6th grade for 6 years. So he could have been the first, guy in middle school to play quarterback. All right, you talk about this, though, Austin Simmons. And, people love to talk about the number 2 quarterback. That's always the most popular player on the team. And Rodney, that's amazing. Walker Howard, a 5-star out of Lafayette, Louisiana. Karen Crow, his father, Walker Howard, played at LSU.
Yep.
Right now, is Ty Simpson solid at number 2, and is he getting many reps in these first couple of games?
He did, and he got a pretty fair number in the opener. He did not play in this last game. Yeah, he's the number 2 guy. The buzz inside the building is that they think he's a future potential star. And then Dylan Lonergan too. I think Dylan's extremely talented. He's got a great arm. He's got some mobility. Both he and Ty have good mobility. So those are 2 really good young prospects there. But again, here's the thing. And like you said, everyone thinks the number 2 guys that the answer always, you really don't know because first of all, experience is a key factor at that position. Yeah. And so nobody's really saying pull Milroe, right? I mean, eventually if things go wrong, people might start really getting on that bandwagon. But I don't think there's anyone with the inconsistencies that we've seen last year and we saw some the other night. I don't think anyone's really suggesting that.
Well, is Dylan Lonergan out of Buford, Georgia?
No, he's out of Snellville, Brookwood, okay. Georgia. Yeah, Brookwood High School.
Yeah, Justin Haynes, though, the running back, is from Buford, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we hadn't even talked about that, guys. Look, we'll wrap it up here.
Well, I wanted to say just to confirm to everyone, and I knew this. I just wanted to make sure I had it right. Billy Napier in his presser yesterday did name Graham Mertz as Florida's starting QB, but Lagway will be utilized multiple times during a game, and this is why I have a problem with Billy Napier because he's stubborn. He's the stubborn man.
Not a good decision, I'll say that.
Well, you know what's cool about this show, guys, is like last week I texted Brendan and I called him. I heard on another show them talking about the quarterback situation at Florida. And of course, Brendan was a day ahead of that. That we are so blessed, folks. And watch the Buddy Martin show, 9 p.m. Eastern on this same channel, Monday through Thursday. They talk a lot of Gators, but God, they have great guests, great panel. They got the best producer in the world, this guy right here, who keeps me in my lanes.
It's a lot like Tiderinsider in the sense of like it's a really good site with great information, and it's got all it's got what you want. And I think that's where you really find out stuff in sports. So thanks for saying so. But we work hard. We got Franz Beard and a lot of great guys and writers and staff, and we're blessed in that aspect. So yeah.
And that's what we're doing on this channel, Rodney and Yancy. Y'all know this, is that we want to have a place where, you can fly over from coast to coast and look down. But as Brendan always says, drill down local. Tiderinsider and Rodney Orr. Guys, I'll start with you, Yancy. Tell them how they can follow you, and then you do it, Rodney. And I'll just say this before we go. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Go out and help people out every day. We're all blessed. Go bless others. Yancy, check us out.
Easy. Just at Yancy Porter anywhere on social media.
Easy there. Rodney Orr.
Yeah, it's tiderinsider.com. It's only $48 a year. You can get instant access with your credit card, or there is an address there to send a check. Gives you all our premium stuff, but also our all sports forum. We have a great community of Alabama fans, but also, and I think the book there, it may have popped up, I'm not sure, but Bigger Than Bama. You can find it at rodneyorr.com or on Amazon.
Absolutely, man. Hey, Brendan, thank you. Awesome keeping us in the lanes. There's so much to talk about. We got another packed show tomorrow, as we do every day. Support all of our sponsors at sidelines.live. We'll have great news coming up soon in the sports world. See you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.